A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to Films I'm Willing to Talk About Again. Today, we're pretty much at a good point here, where we can consider that I've talked about a lot of familiar films out there. Ones that I've watched over the years, ones I've talked about before, critiqued before, and gave scores of my own. But now here comes one that I've talked about almost too many times. The Incredible Hulk. No, not that one. I don't really know if I will talk about that one though. I'm specifically talking about the 2003 film by Ang Lee. Yes, I've talked about this one constantly, especially since the very beginning of this channel in July 2008. So, at that time, this film was 5 years old, but now, 19 years have passed. So it's safe to say that for a film like this, the fact that I've constantly talked about it is one thing. The fact I gave it my own point of view on it, how I felt about the cast, the characters, the plot, the storyline, and of course the ending to this film. But let's just go ahead and give it a full-on analysis, unlike what I have ever done here on the channel or otherwise. I've watched this thing so many times, and I'm now more than guaranteed to reveal whatever kind of detail I could have possibly missed back then. Because 14 years have passed since the last time I talked about this film on the channel as a whole. So, I gave it another watch last night, and it's pretty much fresh in my mind again. The way I see it though, a lot of people might think of it as a crappy 2003 film by Ang Lee, one that features the Incredible Hulk, one that does in fact have a decent cast lineup, including members like Eric Bana, Jennifer Connelly, Sam Elliott, Nick Nolte, Lou Ferrigno, whom was basically a cameo appearance, but fun fact, in the 1978 to 1982 television series starring Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno was in fact the original actor for the Incredible Hulk on that set, but it's a pretty nice way to bring back the actor Lou Ferrigno into the Incredible Hulk franchise. And of course we've also gotten to see Ferrigno voice the Incredible Hulk at times, like in the 1996 cartoon, or even at that one moment in the Avengers, after he beats up Loki. So, of course, it's a pretty nice touch to have Ferrigno back in the Hulk lineup of films and other such media. But in any case, the cast is decent. I especially like how Bana interprets Bruce Banner in a much more younger sort of appearance. And in turn, when he transforms into the Hulk, this is a bit of a different sort of look on the Hulk, unlike how most adaptations have worked. But in terms of how the plot goes, it's basically like this. It tends to give us a full-on origin of how Bruce Banner came to be, which is basically like most other characters. Simple conception by a mother and a father. But unlike the good majority of which, Bruce Banner actually came out to be very smart and possess an extraordinary amount of gifts, mostly on the sides of intelligence, creativity, and ingenuity. Unfortunately though, Banner's amazing brain power is not enough to convince his own father, Brian Banner, to give him whatever love he needs, and anything he will need for his life. What eventually does happen though is, as tragic as it sounds, unfortunately, Bruce becomes very traumatized after a murder happens right in front of him. His own parents end up in so much conflict that Brian actually got ahead and murdered his own wife. And so this does of course allow for Bruce to actually create some sort of imaginary friend to talk to. An emotional outlet that would actually last for a long time, up until Bruce would eventually be recruited into the Berkeley Radiological Laboratories out there in California. But at some time, after a little while studying the effects of gamma radiation for military usage, Banner accidentally gets infused with a large dosage of gamma radiation after the machine goes haywire. And upon exposure, it almost seemed like Banner was going to die from the extreme amounts of radiation poisoning that would have set in. But unfortunately, this would not be the case. Banner would instead don the incredible strength, power, size, speed, agility, and look of the Incredible Hulk himself. The same old imaginary friend who helped Banner all these years, but sometimes was a combination of destruction, anger, violence, and a bunch of other things that Banner did not like to have. Every time Banner would get angry, he would transform into the one and only green behemoth himself, the Hulk. And the first time that this happens on screen is right there in the Berkeley labs themselves. Lots of things get damaged. Police are responded to the scene, but apparently the janitor in the building is actually none other than Bruce's father, whom had in fact gotten out of prison. He's played by Nick Nolte, so I do feel like that for a number of things out there, he probably wouldn't have been the greatest option out there. At any given moment in time, if Bill Bixby were still alive, then maybe Bixby could have been part of that, but no, that's not the case. At least in this fashion. Yet I do feel that the combination of the Incredible Hulk, as well as the one and only David Banner, whom of course was in the show, Brian Banner must have not necessarily gotten the cut here. They probably wanted to incorporate this film into the lore that had been established within the 77 to 82 series itself. That's including the pilots in 77 and ran all the way up to 1982 with some lost episodes. Then of course there was the 3-part TV movie trilogy, 1988 to 1990. But above all that though, I still do feel like that while this does try to bear connections to the old school cartoon, live action series itself, this 2003 film doesn't really need to go all that far. After all, the TV movies themselves simply handed it down that David Banner had died in a long fall. But in this film, apparently that's not the case. Anyways though, after some time, a lot of things do take place. Conflicts start to erupt. The military gets called into action to try and find Bruce Banner after some more Hulk outs take place. Eventually, after being turned in to the government, Bruce Banner is kept in a secret underground facility, disguised as an ice cream shop, out there in the desert. But after another Hulk out happens, and the Hulk manages to escape the base, some of the most memorable moments in the entire film alone actually do begin to happen here. Action that involves the Hulk taking revenge against the military for a number of things that had happened over the years. It first goes on to point out that, well, the Hulk does eventually make it back to his original hometown, his original home himself, which unfortunately gets blown up by some bombs. And the Hulk jumps out and escapes from them and ends up in some sandy pits. You can't jump from the sand, you can't run from the sand, but eventually tanks start to roll in, and probably one of the most incredible moments ever in the entire film alone, Hulk busting up 4 different military tanks, throwing them, crushing them, smashing them, bending one of the cannons so it faces into the cockpit. Now that is a pretty impressive feat of Hulk's natural strength. But it only gets better from there. After leaving the scene with the tanks, the Hulk enters canyons, pretty much, that enter through the deserts as well, encountering a few military helicopters, which of course are simply led by the leader of this military crew himself, Sam Elliott's very own character. But it's still important to note that, well, there does seem to be a bit of a connection between him and the Hulk. So, I can't really explain how that really works, but amongst all the things that are considered, it does almost seem like that there is some sort of personal giveaway that's right there, and I just cannot spot it even to this day. There's probably people out there who are more observant of that thing than I am, but in any case though, after the fight with the helicopters is over, the Hulk eventually goes all the way over to San Francisco near the Golden Gate Bridge, where he then encounters some fighter jets. So tanks, helicopters, and now jets. And the jets were actually strong enough and fast enough to take the Incredible Hulk all the way up to the outer area of the Earth itself. All the way up past the atmosphere, which was incredible to say the least. It did cause Hulk to lose consciousness and fall all the way down to the ocean. And upon resurfacing, by going underground and simply smashing the road from below, entering in a pretty incredible manner by all means, setting up earthquakes and a number of different things, before eventually calming down after he sees Jennifer Connelly's own Betty Ross, whom of course he had seen before in a previous scene that took place at night. And when it comes to the nighttime scenes though, a lot of people had actually complained that when they saw this film in theaters, the lighting was way too dark to see. Even when it was completely blacked out in the theaters, it would still be very impossible to spot. But thankfully, with a lot of graphical enhancements, we are able to get a bit of a clearer picture of the scenes that almost seem too dark to look at. But if you still feel like that you're not seeing them just right, maybe go ahead and turn up the brightness on your device. Especially if you're watching it on a smartphone. So, by all means, the Hulk had been through a lot. He had attacked a lot of different military personnel, destroyed a bunch of vehicles, and eventually made way to San Francisco before turning back into Bruce Banner again. But this time, of course, the military convinced David Banner to go meet up with Bruce, a father-to-son talk about what they could do at some point in time. It actually gets down to a point where probably one of the craziest moments ever in the entire film could have ever taken place. Nick Nolte simply just gets up off the chair, grabs onto the power cables, bites down on them, and the electricity starts to flow through. It was discovered, too late pretty much, that David Banner actually had the power of absorption, and simply turned into a character known as the Absorbing Man, simply after absorbing a huge amount of gamma radiation in the same way that Bruce did. So, the fight pretty much breaks out between both of them. This fight is seemingly equal between both of them. David Banner has the power of absorption of any sort of element out there. From lightning, to water, to rock, to anything else that you can think of. And all Bruce has is the power of strength. Not to mention speed, agility, and a multitude of other things, blended into one large green package. The fight itself takes place in a large quarry, in a lake, with cliffside walls, that do in fact end up in both of them ending up inside the water. This does of course cause Bruce Banner to realize that there's nothing he could do to truly stop the Absorbing Man. Eventually, figuring out that the Absorbing Man can in fact absorb anything he touches. So what do you think happens here? Well, it's simple. The Hulk increases his power. He literally gives every single bit of his own power in the form of increased anger to David. Like, he's basically making him stronger in a way. But apparently, that's actually his weakness. If he absorbs too much power, it's almost uncontrollable. Or uncontainable even. Eventually, some sort of giant, like, bubble comes out of the water itself. And then, of course, well, the military are ordered to nuke them both. And it apparently does kill David, but it does not kill Bruce. Bruce somehow survived and ended up going all the way down to the south, as far to the south as possible in the world. He would remain there to the very end, in the luscious jungles, until, of course, The Incredible Hulk 2008 would pretty much come by and, simply put, take place at that same time. So, by all means, that's pretty much what you need to know about this film. Contrary to popular belief, a lot of people might not look at this as a great film, but I feel like that it was quite a big piece of my own childhood put together. The fact that anger, intelligence, and a bunch of other abilities could all come together into one, and it's quite a big vision to have out there. One that a lot of people might not be guaranteed to have, but yet, we probably won't expect such things to happen out there. If we truly were to evolve into such green behemoth beings or anything else like this in general, it's guaranteed to be a lot of work to manage. But in any case though, this film was pretty good. It had a good soundtrack by Danny Elfman, the same guy who had done the Batman films by Tim Burton, for example. And of course, Ang Lee himself is a pretty good director in most other films, but this might have been the one that could have been lower than most that were done by other directors. Had a decent cast, had itself a well-put plot, and did have itself a bunch of nice twists and some incredible action scenes that you probably wouldn't get today as much. Simply because the usage of CG rules over the world. And so, that's just how I see this. And maybe you might see it the same way or even different. In any case though, if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.